everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm on the northwest side of Charlotte today off of Beatty's Ford Road because I want to talk about another one of the American Revolutionary War battles that was fought in Mecklenburg County. This one is probably my favorite of those 6. This one is called the Battle of the Bees. It's my favorite story and I can't wait to show you. It's also referred to as the battle at McIntyre's farm. And that's why I've brought you to the historic McIntyre farm site. And we're going to look at the monuments that are here and take a short little nature hike. I hope you enjoy this video. This one's a good story.
Hello everyone! In today's video, we are going to explore some areas just a few miles north of Charlotte, North Carolina that are named in honor of our very famous Battle of the Bees, which is third in our series about the 6 Revolutionary War battles fought in Mecklenburg County. If you remember from yesterday's video, the town of Charlotte fell to the British at noon on September 26, 1780, as Lord Cornwallis and his entourage rolled into town. The Patriots, under General William Lee Davidson and Major Joseph Graham, were seriously outnumbered, and after a quick altercation at the courthouse in the middle of town, they were forced to begin withdrawing northward along the old Salisbury Highway. Skirmishes continued the rest of that day, and Joseph Graham was so severely wounded he would not be able to return to the front lines for months. The British Army entourage, which included about 4,000 people, set up camp right in the heart of Charlotte, completely overwhelming the tiny town that only had a few hundred residents. Lord Cornwallis himself moved into Thomas Polk's home, a gigantic middle finger to the family of the man who had been so instrumental in first declaring Charlotte's independence from British rule. Charlotte was just not prepared to handle this large of a number of incoming troops, and within a week, resources were exhausted. Lord Cornwallis was forced to create foraging parties to send out and replenish supplies. Foraging parties offered the Patriot militia forces plenty of opportunities to engage in pesky skirmishes, and the Patriots quickly became a thorn in Cornwallis's backside. On October 3, 1780, just a week after Charlotte fell into British hands, a large foraging party under the command of Captain John Doyle rolled out of Charlotte along a major road known as Beatty's Ford Road, an entourage of 450 troops and 60 empty wagons to gather supplies from anywhere they could plunder. They anticipated that there would likely be trouble with the colonists, which is why the foragers were accompanied by troops prepared for a battle. Captain Doyle's men most likely included the Provincial Volunteers of Ireland as well as 60 cavalry on horseback. A local young boy spotted the entourage coming and ran ahead to sound the warning that the British and Loyalists were coming. The first plantation farm that the boy came to belonged to a family known as the McIntyre's, about 7 or 8 miles north of Charlotte city center. Then he rode on horseback to find Captain James Thompson of the local militia. Thompson quickly rounded up Captain James Knox and 13 local farmers to come prepared for an engagement with Captain Doyle's troops at the McIntyre farm. The 13 local farmers included Frank Bradley, John Dixon, Thomas Dixon, George Graham, James Henry, George Houston, Hugh Houston, John Long, Thomas McClure, John Robinson, Robert Robinson, Edward Shipley, and George Shipley. They took up positions at hiding places along the farm, but they were terribly outnumbered, 15 Patriots against an incoming party of 450 British and Loyalists. Captain Doyle's men soon arrived at the McIntyre farm, and Thompson and his men watched from their hiding places as they began their plunder. They ransacked barns for food and feed and raided the livestock pens. They loaded up all the corn and oats they could find in the 60 wagons. They stole pigs, chickens, and ducks, and they tied all of the McIntyre's horses to the wagons. They even ransacked the McIntyre's family home. But what happened next turned into pure pandemonium. One of the Loyalist troops inadvertently kicked over some beehives, and within seconds, the whole entire party was under attack by thousands of enraged, swarming bees. To add to the chaos, the British officers' war dogs joined enthusiastically in the pandemonium, which only riled up the bees even more and turned the whole situation into a full-blown panic. One of the Loyalist officers stood in the doorway of the McIntyre barn, just laughing at his men as they frantically started running away, swatting at the bees as they went. But the swarm only got angrier, and this provided the perfect chaotic distraction for Captain Thompson and his men to approach the raiders. Thompson yelled out of the pandemonium that he had a captain of the British forces in his sight line, and that every single one of his men that were with him was also trained in on a target. He and his militiamen fired at the same time and took out their targets: 9 soldiers, 2 horses, and that laughing British captain standing in the barn doorway. The British, swarming bees and all, mounted their horses and attempted to form a solid line, but Captain Thompson and his men were able to reload and fire a second round. The British unleashed their dogs to come after the Patriots, springing and nipping at them in provocation of the gunfire, but the Patriots shot some of the dogs and the rest ran back to their masters. In the confusion of the chaos, Captain Doyle believed that his men were being attacked by a much larger force than just a dozen or so farmers under the guidance of a couple of captains, and he ordered an immediate, speedy retreat back towards Charlotte. But by this point, word of the skirmish had gotten out, and even more local farmers were showing up along Beatty's Ford Road, firing at the British from concealed vantage points as they retreated, every step of the way. The horses pulling the wagons were shot down, which caused the road to become blocked, and the path of retreat became a scene of complete chaos despite the British and Loyalists frantically trying to remain in some semblance of formation. They continued to try to engage in proper array and repeatedly offered to fight their enemy in an outright battle, but the Patriots maintained their invisible advantages and renewed fire at every opportunity. A survivor later said that it seemed like every single bush along the road concealed a rebel. Captain Doyle's men ultimately abandoned their loot and spoils and took off on horseback towards Charlotte empty-handed. Some of them rode their horses so pell-mell the horses fell down in the street. A final tally of the skirmish revealed that 8 Loyalists were killed and 12 were wounded, but not one single Patriot was reported dead or injured. The Battle of the Bees did not drive Lord Cornwallis out of Charlotte, but it definitely stung him in the rear, you might say. It was just one of many skirmishes fought between Patriot militia and his troops during his time occupying Charlotte, but it was certainly the most significant and memorable. The skirmish reinforced the effectiveness of the guerrilla tactics being employed by local militia, who wore down the British forces who were more accustomed to their conventional European-style warfare. The British were already struggling to maintain control in a hostile countryside, and this kind of harassment deepened their logistical and psychological challenges. While minor on paper, battles like this made the British occupation of the South ever more increasingly untenable. The constant ambushes and resistance in the backcountry drained British resources and morale, and it reflected the larger pattern of grassroots resistance that made British control over the Carolinas so fragile. These small-scale local engagements and victories had a cumulative strategic effect and paved the way for eventual American victory. Cornwallis ended up occupying Charlotte for a total of 16 days, leaving Charlotte on October 12, 1780, to continue his march northward towards Virginia. As he was leaving town, he was overheard to refer to Charlotte as a defiant and rebellious town, a damned hornet's nest. Although the British were figuratively stung by unrelenting hostility and violent ambushes, at least one foraging party was stung literally by patriots and by bees in the skirmish at McIntyre's farm. The McIntyre farmhouse, which was one of the oldest buildings in Mecklenburg County, still bore bullet holes from this battle until it was demolished in 1941. In retelling of this story over the years, the McIntyre beehives have evolved into hornets' nests, and Charlotte has proudly adopted swarming hornets around a hornet nest as our city's emblem. It's on our police departments and badges and all over the north side of town in the Beatty's Ford community. The hornet's name and logo symbolizes toughness and local pride, and it has become a lasting emblem of resistance, small but fierce, swarming together in defiance. When Charlotte's NBA team adopted the name the Hornets in 1988, this was not just a mascot. This was a nod to our historical identity, reinforcing the idea of a community that fights back and protects its own.
Okay, everybody, I hope you enjoyed the story of the Battle of the Bees or the battle at McIntyre's farm. I love getting to come places like this and show you neat historical sites. So I'll see you another day in another American Revolutionary War battle.